It was a quiet morning in late March, the kind where the sun rose slow and soft, painting the Texas sky in pale pink and gold. The town was still half asleep, and so was Eastfield High, a small brick school that had seen generations of kids pass through its squeaky doors. The cracked sidewalks leading up to the building were littered with last night's fallen leaves, and the flagpole out front stood tall, its flag hanging limp in the faint breeze. Hannah Carter walked along that path like she did every day, her steps measured and light, as if she was careful not to draw attention to herself. She carried an old denim backpack, the fabric frayed at the corners, clutched tightly against her chest. Her sneakers were plain, her brown hair pulled into a lazy ponytail, and her face free of makeup. There was nothing remarkable about her at first glance, and that was exactly how she liked it. Hannah had always been the quiet one, the girl who slipped through the hallways without leaving a ripple. Life had taught her to stay small, to avoid trouble, and just get through each day. After her older brother Ethan's accident 2 years ago, a crash that left him bound to a wheelchair, she'd learned that her world didn't have room for drama or popularity contests. Instead, her days were filled with pushing Ethan to physical therapy, helping with his homework, and doing what needed to be done. There was comfort in invisibility. That morning, though, something shifted. As Hannah neared the front steps, she noticed 3 boys blocking the walkway. They were the kind of boys everyone at Eastfield knew by name: Ryan Mitchell, Cole Barrett, and Jason Turner. Sons of powerful men in town, they wore their football jackets like armor and moved like they owned the ground they stood on. Their sneakers were spotless, their voices too loud, and their laughter carried the kind of confidence that came from never having been told no. In front of them stood a girl Hannah had seen once or twice in algebra class. Chloe Brown, petite, dark-skinned, her tight black curls pulled back into a puff. Chloe had only transferred from Dallas a few weeks ago, and though she didn't talk much, there was a quiet confidence in her posture that some people didn't seem to like. "Where's your hall pass, Beyoncé?" Ryan's voice boomed across the courtyard, drawing a few chuckles from the windows above. Chloe didn't answer. She tried to walk past, shoulders squared, head held high. That was her mistake. Cole stepped in front of her, blocking the way while Jason circled behind. Hannah froze mid-step. Her stomach tightened as she watched the scene unfold. Ryan leaned in closer to Chloe, lips curled in a smirk. Hannah couldn't hear the words, but she saw Chloe's shoulders tense, her fingers gripping her backpack straps tighter. Then it happened. Cole shoved her hard. Chloe stumbled sideways, her backpack slipping off, books scattering across the pavement. Her knees scraped against the rough cement. Ryan laughed. Jason let out a sharp whistle, and the 3 boys stood there as if they had just done something hilarious. Chloe winced, but she didn't cry. She simply began picking up her things in silence, her movements slow and steady. And no one moved. Not the students watching from inside, not the teachers lingering by the doors, not even the security guard sipping coffee from his SUV just a few feet away. Hannah's heart pounded, her hands gripping her backpack so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She heard her mother's voice echoing in her mind. "Keep your head down, sweetheart. Just get through the day." She wanted to listen. She wanted to walk past and pretend she hadn't seen anything. That was safer, easier. But then Chloe looked up. Their eyes met for the briefest moment. There was no plea, no shame, just a silent question that seemed to hang heavy in the air. "Are you really going to do nothing?" Hannah's stomach twisted. Something about that gaze wouldn't let her walk away. What would you do if you were standing there? Would you stay quiet or step forward? Stay with us to see how Hannah answers that question. And if you believe in stories that remind us to be kind, to stand up for what's right, make sure to subscribe to Heart Touch Stories, leave a like, and share your thoughts below. Ryan's laughter still echoed in the courtyard as Chloe knelt on the cold pavement, quietly gathering her scattered notebooks and loose papers. The boys stood above her like they owned the ground beneath her feet, smirks plastered across their faces. Cole kicked one of her textbooks farther away just to watch her crawl for it. Jason leaned casually against the flagpole, arms crossed, as if this was all just another form of entertainment to start the school day. The other students who had seen it happen, they looked away. Some ducked inside the school building, a few whispered behind cupped hands, their eyes darting between Chloe and the boys, but no one stepped forward. It wasn't that they agreed with what was happening, it was that this was just how things were. Even the adults weren't any better. Two teachers stood near the doors pretending to scroll on their phones. A security guard sat in his SUV sipping coffee like he hadn't seen a thing. Hannah stood frozen in place, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to move, to do something, but her legs felt like they were stuck in concrete. Her mother's voice played in her head, as clear as if she were right there beside her. "Sweetheart, avoid trouble. Keep your head down. Just get through high school, and life will be better after." For as long as she could remember, Hannah had listened to that advice. It wasn't bad advice. After Ethan's accident, her family had learned the hard way that trouble had a way of sticking, of growing into something bigger than you could handle. So she became the invisible girl, the one who blended in, the one who never fought back when people made snide comments about her old clothes or her quiet nature. This, right now, was the exact kind of moment her mom warned her about. If she stepped in, she would draw attention to herself. She could become the next target. The thought of being mocked, ridiculed, or humiliated the way Chloe was now made her stomach twist painfully. But then Chloe looked up again. It was such a small thing, just a glance, a single meeting of eyes, but it felt like everything stopped. There was no begging in Chloe's gaze, no tears, no desperation. It was steadier than that. It was a question. Are you really going to let this happen? That single moment cracked something inside Hannah. Her throat felt tight. She imagined Ethan, her brother, the way people sometimes stared at him like he was less than whole because of his wheelchair. She thought about the first time she had seen kids whisper about him in the grocery store, laughing quietly behind his back. She hadn't said anything then either. She just walked away. The guilt of that day came rushing back, heavy and suffocating. She imagined how Chloe must feel now, hurt, humiliated, and completely alone. Hannah's grip on her backpack tightened until her knuckles ached. "Keep walking," she told herself. "Just walk to class. You don't need to get involved. You're not strong enough to face them." But another voice pushed back, small but unrelenting. "If you don't say something now, when will you ever?" The boys were still laughing. Ryan had picked up Chloe's pencil case and was tossing it back and forth with Jason like it was a toy. Cole stood over Chloe, grinning, as she tried to pick up her last notebook. Hannah felt the burn of anger rising in her chest, colliding with the fear that had rooted her in place. Her breath came faster, her mind replaying every insult she'd ever swallowed, every time she'd stayed quiet to avoid conflict. This wasn't just about Chloe anymore. This was about who Hannah wanted to be, the kind of person she would become if she turned her back one more time. The courtyard felt unbearably still. Even the morning air seemed to hold its breath. She looked at Chloe one last time, and for the first time that morning, Chloe didn't look strong. She just looked tired, tired of having to pretend that she didn't care, tired of always having to hold her head up high while the world tried to tear her down. And that broke something in Hannah completely. "Do something," she whispered to herself, though her lips barely moved. But her feet still wouldn't budge. Fear was a heavy thing. It kept her pinned in place, whispering every terrible possibility in her ear. What if they turned on her? What if they laughed? What if she made things worse for Chloe? But another thought pressed through the fear like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. What if I'm the only one who can make this stop? It wasn't a grand, heroic revelation. It wasn't like the movies where a triumphant soundtrack swells as the hero takes a stand. It was quieter than that, heavier than that. It was the slow, painful understanding that silence, though safer, was also a choice. And that choice had consequences. Hannah felt her legs shift slightly, almost without thinking. It was small, but it was something. She stared at the boys, her jaw tightening, her breath steadying. Ryan caught her gaze and smirked. "What are you looking at?" he sneered. Hannah looked away quickly, her chest tightening again. Fear roared back, but that fleeting moment of courage hadn't completely disappeared. It sat there, waiting, like a spark ready to catch. Inside her, two voices battled fiercely, one begging her to turn away, the other urging her to step forward. This was the kind of choice that would linger forever. Because sometimes, the moments that define us are not the ones we plan for, but the ones that arrive quietly, demanding an answer we can't avoid. And Hannah knew deep down that whatever she did next would stay with her for the rest of her life. Lunch at Eastfield High was always loud, trays clattering, chairs scraping, students calling to each other across crowded tables. But when Hannah walked into the cafeteria that day, the noise seemed to blur into a dull hum in her ears. She scanned the room until she found Chloe sitting alone near the back, her head bent slightly as she poked at a tray of untouched food. Hannah hesitated for a moment, her nerves prickling. Sitting down next to Chloe would be a choice, an obvious one, and choices like that didn't go unnoticed in a school like theirs. But she forced her feet to move anyway. "Hey," Hannah said quietly as she set down her tray. "Is it okay if I sit here?" Chloe looked up, surprised. Her dark eyes searched Hannah's face, then she gave a small nod. "Yeah, sure." For a while, they didn't talk. The sounds of lunch filled the silence between them. Finally, Hannah asked, "Are you okay after this morning?" Chloe shrugged. "I've had worse." She spoke so simply that it hurt more than if she'd been crying. "You didn't deserve that," Hannah said softly. Chloe didn't answer right away. She stabbed a piece of apple with her fork but didn't eat it. "It happens," she said finally. "I learned a long time ago that if you act like it doesn't bother you, people get bored and move on." Hannah swallowed hard. She could feel Chloe's quiet strength, but underneath it was something raw and heavy. For the rest of lunch, they sat together in silence. Hannah wanted to say more, but the words tangled in her throat. When the bell rang, students poured out of the cafeteria in loud waves. Hannah spotted Ryan, Cole, and Jason heading toward the vending machines behind the gym, laughing like they owned the place. Her heart started pounding. This was it. She tightened her ponytail, like somehow that small act could steady her shaking hands. Then she took off her backpack, handed it to Chloe, and stood up. "Hold this for me," she said. Chloe blinked. "Wait, what are you—" But Hannah was already walking. Each step felt heavier than the last, but something in her chest burned hotter with every stride. The boys noticed her approaching and exchanged amused grins. "Well, well," Jason said. "Look who finally found her voice." Hannah stopped a few feet away, her breathing steady. "You think what you did earlier was funny?" she asked, her voice calm. Ryan smirked. "It was a joke," she tripped. "Really?" Hannah said, tilting her head slightly. "Because from where I was standing, you shoved her." Cole crossed his arms. "And what are you going to do about it?" Hannah met each of their eyes in turn. "I don't need to do anything. You already did enough. There's security footage. The school has cameras at the front steps. You're all on it." It wasn't true. She didn't know if there were cameras. But for the first time that day, their smirks faltered. Jason laughed nervously. "You're bluffing." "Try me," Hannah said. "But just know, next time you touch her, I won't need cameras." Ryan took a step closer, his voice dropping. "You think you're some kind of hero now?" Hannah didn't flinch. "I think you're scared of people who aren't." Ryan's hand twitched like he might shove her, but before he could, a firm voice cut through the air. "Don't." All three boys froze. Coach Miller was walking toward them, a duffel slung over his shoulder. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried the weight of authority. "You lay a hand on her," Coach Miller said flatly, "and you're out. Not just off the team. Out!" Ryan's jaw tightened. After a tense beat, he dropped his hand. Cole looked away. Jason muttered something under his breath, but none of them said another word. Hannah exhaled slowly as they turned and walked off. When she turned around, Chloe was standing there holding her backpack. Her eyes were wide. "Why'd you do that?" Chloe asked softly. Hannah gave a tired smile. "Because someone should." That afternoon, Hannah was called into the principal's office. She expected to get in trouble, but instead, Mrs. Thompson simply asked her to confirm what Chloe had told the front desk. "Is it true? Everything she said?" the principal asked. Hannah nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Every word." Mrs. Thompson sighed, taking off her glasses. "We've had issues with those boys before. This time we'll take it seriously. But I want you to know, you don't have to fix what's broken in this place." Hannah paused at the doorway before answering quietly. "Maybe not, but I don't want to be part of breaking it either." Word spread quickly. By the next morning, a video of the confrontation behind the gym had made its way through half the school. Someone had recorded the whole thing on their phone. But instead of showing the truth, they edited it. The caption read, "Girl thinks she's a hero, starts drama for attention." Some students laughed, others shared it. A few even added music to mock her. By third period, Hannah's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She turned it off. At lunch, Chloe found her sitting outside on a bench. Without a word, Chloe held out a small box wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" Hannah asked. "A thank you," Chloe said. Inside was a simple bracelet woven with black, red, and gold threads. Hannah slipped it on. It fit perfectly. "I didn't do it for thanks," Hannah said quietly. "I know," Chloe replied. "That's why it matters." The days that followed were strange. Hannah could feel the stares in the hallway, some mocking, some curious, and a few that felt like quiet respect. Ryan still puffed out his chest when he passed her, but he didn't say a word. Coach Miller made sure of that, keeping a close eye on him in gym class. Hannah's life hadn't magically gotten better. In fact, she became the center of more gossip than ever. But something had shifted. Every so often, a student she barely knew would give her a small nod in the hallway. Once, a girl she'd never spoken to slipped a note into her locker. "Thank you, for Chloe, for all of us." Hannah folded the note carefully and kept it in her back pocket. She realized then that courage didn't always look like a big, loud moment. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was as simple as standing still when everyone else turned away. And even though the teasing hadn't stopped, Hannah felt lighter than she had in years. Because for the first time, she wasn't invisible anymore, and she didn't mind being seen. A few days later, everything changed. On a quiet Tuesday morning, while Hannah was still half asleep at her locker, her phone buzzed with a new notification. It wasn't another mocking video or cruel comment. It was a link to a post from an anonymous account. Someone had uploaded the unedited footage from that day behind the gym. There were no captions, no music, no twisting of the story. Just the raw moment as it happened. Ryan shoving Chloe, the boys laughing, and Hannah stepping forward, steady and unshaken. The truth spread faster than the lies ever had. By lunchtime, nearly everyone had seen it. The comment section started to flip. "Wow, she was just standing up for her. Didn't realize those guys were that awful. Guess she's not as attention-seeking as people made her out to be." For the first time since the incident, Hannah felt the weight on her chest ease a little. The whispers in the hallway changed too. Instead of ridicule, there were small nods of acknowledgement. Even students she'd never spoken to before would give her a quick smile, as if to say, "Thank you." That afternoon, Hannah's inbox pinged with an unexpected message. It was from Coach Miller. "Heard about the video. Proud of you. Also, we're starting a new student-led mentorship program. The principal thinks you'd be a great guide. Think about it." Hannah read the message 3 times. She'd never seen herself as a leader. She didn't like the spotlight. But as she stared at the screen, she thought about Chloe. How much it had mattered that someone stood up for her that day. She typed back one word. Yes. The following week, Hannah found herself standing backstage in the school auditorium, heart hammering so loudly she thought the microphone might pick it up before she even spoke. The principal introduced her simply, a student who decided to do the right thing, even when it wasn't easy. Hannah stepped forward. The stage lights were warm on her face, and hundreds of eyes stared back at her. She took a shaky breath. "I'm not here because I'm fearless," she began. "I'm here because I almost walked away. And I realized something, that if I turned my back once, I'd probably keep turning my back forever." The room was silent. "I didn't stand up because I wanted to be brave," she continued. "I stood up because Chloe deserves someone to care, because sometimes doing nothing feels safe, but deep down, you know it's wrong. I used to think power was about being the loudest, the strongest, the one who could hit back the hardest. But now I know real power is about knowing when to stand up, not for yourself, but for someone else." Her voice wavered for a second, but she didn't look away. "We all get to decide the kind of people we'll be. Every day in small ways, we choose. What we allow becomes who we are. If we let silence cover up what's wrong, then we're part of the wrong. I'm not better than anyone here. I've been scared. I've wanted to disappear, but I'm still here. And sometimes, that's all it takes for someone else to keep showing up too." For a long, breathless moment, no one clapped. Then a single pair of hands started. Then another, and another. The applause grew, not wild or frenzied, but steady, real. Hannah stepped off the stage, her heart pounding, her knees weak but steady under her. By the time she reached the floor, Chloe was already waiting by her locker. "I told you," Chloe said softly, smiling. "You had a voice." Hannah let out a breath that felt like she'd been holding it for weeks. "I didn't know it mattered," she said, until someone listened. Over the next few days, things began to shift, not dramatically, but in quiet, meaningful ways. A few freshmen signed up for the new mentorship program. Chloe started hosting a small poetry group in the library, and Hannah showed up early to help set up chairs. The girl who had slipped that thank you note into Hannah's locker began eating lunch with them. Then another student joined, and another. Not because Hannah promised to protect anyone, but because she'd shown that strength didn't have to be loud to be real. People started to see her differently. Even teachers gave her small nods of approval when she passed them in the hallway. But Hannah didn't care about any of that. What mattered most was that Chloe wasn't walking alone anymore, and neither was she. The weeks that followed felt different. Not because the hallways suddenly became kind, or because bullies vanished overnight. Eastfield High was still the same messy, complicated place it had always been. But something had shifted in ways that were small, yet impossible to ignore. The air in the school felt lighter, as if a quiet understanding had settled over the students. No one said it out loud, but people started paying attention to the way they treated each other. It wasn't a dramatic change. There were still whispers, still side glances, still moments of cruelty. But now there were also moments of pause, of hesitation, where someone who might have laughed before instead chose to stay silent. Hannah noticed it in small ways. A boy who used to trip freshmen in the hallway now stepped aside instead. A group of girls who had once snickered at Chloe in class asked to borrow a pencil without the mocking tone. Even the teachers seemed to watch more closely, stepping in sooner when something felt off. Chloe noticed it too. "It's not perfect," she said one afternoon as they walked to class together. "But it feels like people are thinking twice. That matters." Hannah nodded. She didn't feel like a hero, just someone who had finally done what needed to be done. But she couldn't deny it. One choice, one moment had created ripples that reached further than she ever imagined. It made her wonder how many other silent battles were happening in that school every day. Moments where someone just needed a reason to be brave. And maybe now, they had one. Hannah and Chloe became inseparable. They didn't need to say much. There was an ease between them, a quiet understanding born from that day when everything changed. They started sitting together at lunch, sometimes joined by a few other students who, like Chloe once had, were used to being invisible. One afternoon, as they sat in their usual spot near the library windows, a tiny freshman girl with messy bangs and sleeves pulled down over her hands approached them. She looked nervous, glancing around as though worried someone might see. Is it okay if I sit here?" she asked softly. Hannah noticed the faint purple bruise peeking out from under the girl's sleeve. She didn't ask about it. She didn't need to. "Of course," Hannah said, sliding over to make space. Chloe handed the girl half of her sandwich without a word. The girl blinked in surprise, then smiled. A small, cautious smile, the kind that came from not being used to kindness. It was a simple moment, but to Hannah, it felt like everything. That night, sitting on the porch with Ethan, Hannah finally told him what had been on her mind. The cicadas hummed in the distance as the two of them watched the Texas sky fade into dusk. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think strength was about hitting back harder, about proving you were tougher than the people trying to hurt you." Ethan looked at her, waiting. "But I think strength," she continued, "is knowing when to stand up and who you're standing up for." Ethan's smile was tired but warm. "That sounds like the kind of strength this world needs more of." Hannah leaned back, watching as the first stars began to appear. "I'm still scared sometimes," she admitted. "Good," Ethan said. "That means you're doing it right." They sat in comfortable silence after that, the kind of silence that didn't feel heavy anymore. Across town, in a crowded hallway the next day, another girl, someone Hannah didn't even know, found herself in a situation that felt all too familiar. A cruel comment, a shove, the sting of being singled out, and for the first time in her life, she stood up. Not with a punch, not with anger, but with steady defiance. Because courage, once seen, has a way of spreading. And even in a world that could be unkind, sometimes it only takes one person, one Hannah Carter, to remind others that silence isn't safety. It's a choice. The freshman girl who had joined Hannah and Chloe at lunch kept coming back every day. She didn't talk much, but she started smiling more. Other students noticed. Some of them quietly joined too, until their table became a small refuge in the stormy world of high school. Hannah never thought of herself as a leader, but she didn't need to be. She just kept showing up. The mentorship program Coach Miller had started slowly grew. Chloe's poetry group became a space where students shared things they'd been too scared to say out loud. And every so often, someone new would sit at their table, someone who had seen what Hannah did and realized they didn't have to be invisible anymore. One Friday afternoon, as the golden light poured through the windows, Chloe turned to Hannah with a smile. "You know," Chloe said, "people keep acting like you changed this place, but I think you just reminded everyone they could." Hannah laughed softly. "Maybe. Or maybe I just stopped pretending I didn't care." "Either way," Chloe said, "you made a difference." Hannah didn't answer right away. She thought about that day in the courtyard, about how easy it would have been to walk away, about how close she had come to doing nothing. "I guess," she said finally, "sometimes all it takes is one person to start something bigger than they ever expected." The next Monday morning, a flyer appeared on the school bulletin board. It wasn't from a teacher or an administrator. It was from a student. It read, "If you're tired of standing alone, come sit with us." No names, no details, just an invitation. By lunch, a few new faces had found their way to Hannah and Chloe's table. And somewhere in that busy cafeteria, a quiet ripple began, proof that kindness, once visible, has a way of multiplying. Sometimes change didn't roar, sometimes it whispered. But whispered change could still move mountains, because courage once witnessed rarely stays in one place. And in that small Texas town, at a school just like thousands of others, the simple act of one girl stepping forward had started something that no amount of cruelty could erase. Sometimes, that's all it takes. One choice, one moment, one voice willing to say, "Not today." Because when even one person dares to step out of the crowd, the world around them begins to shift in ways they may never fully see. What about you? Would you walk away? Or would you be the one to stand up? Sometimes, all it takes is one. What do you think? Share your thoughts below, subscribe to Heart Touch Stories, and help us spread kindness, one story at a time.